Hello, Namaste, Konnichiwa, welcome to Sunny Sensei. In this lesson, we will exclusively focus on procurement management. We have a total of 25 questions on this topic. We shall proceed slowly. The goal is to gradually improve our understanding of the procurement management concepts as we go through these questions. Remember, this is not a test. Still, I suggest that you keep a track of the number of questions you got right. A notebook and a pencil by your side will definitely help. Let's get started with the first question. Which of the following is the incorrect statement about project procurement management? We have to identify the incorrect statement. A. The seller provides services and or materials to the project. This is true and is usually external to the organization owning the project. Again, correct. The buyer and the seller can be from different organizations. Right again. The seller, in most cases, not always, but usually, is not from the buyer's organization. A is a correct statement. Let's check the other options too. B. The seller can sometimes be part of the organization that owns the project but will be external to the project. The buyer and the seller can be a part of the same organization. Correct again. Let me give you an example. I was once engaged with an organization that had multiple business units. Each BU was responsible for a unique set of products. This organization also had a common software division that supplied software to all these BUs. The BUs acted as buyers, and the software division as a supplier. Both belonged to the same organization, and the software division was still external to the projects owned by the BUs. B is a correct statement. C. The seller can sometimes become part of the integrated project team after the contract is awarded. This happens mostly for large scale complex projects. This is true too. An example will be the software industry. You will often see engineers from the supplier side working with engineers from the buyer side, working on the project as a single team. Integrated project team is possible. Again, this is a true statement. D. The seller's project team refers to the procurement contracts for critical inputs such as scope, major deliverables, and key milestones. The procurement contracts facilitate the buyer seller relationship by ensuring no limits on the seller's project team. Indeed, contract is a good reference for critical inputs. Contracts facilitate buyers and sellers relationship too. This is the primary purpose of the contract. But this is not done by ensuring no limits on the seller. This part of the statement is incorrect. Contract might put restrictions or limits on the supplier. For example, some contracts might require the work to be done at a specific location. Others might require the seller to use the same development process as the supplier. Such restrictions are common. D is incorrect. So D is our choice. After discussing the basics of a contract with your organization's legal and procurement team, you made a list of your understanding of the risks associated with the contract. Which one of the following is most likely incorrect? We have to find the incorrect statement about risks associated with the contract. A. Projects that involve sellers spread across various countries are inherently more risky than those projects with only domestic sellers. This statement looks correct to me. Projects with suppliers spread across countries are likely to have a higher risk. Why is it so? It is normally easier to communicate with a supplier that is geographically closer. Distance can also create logistical issues, causing delays in deliveries. Further, laws can differ by countries. This makes contracts complex and enforcement difficult. A looks correct to me. We have to find the incorrect statement, so let's check the other options too. B. The procurement agreement transfers the risks from the buyer to the seller. The legal, procurement, and the project teams should carefully review the contract terms and conditions to ensure this transfer. This statement says that the contract transfers risks from the buyer to the seller. This is not always the case. Contracts work both ways. Contracts can even transfer the risks from the seller to the buyer. B is definitely incorrect. Still, let us review the other options too. Always make sure to check all the options before making the final decision. C. Enforceability of a contract is a risk for both the buyer and the seller. To reduce this risk, all terms and conditions, including jurisdiction, governing law, and the contract's effective date, should be clearly mentioned in the contract. Correct. Enforceability is indeed a risk. Terms and conditions, such as jurisdiction and others, are designed to reduce this risk. C is a correct statement. D. No seller is capable of managing or owning all the risks associated with the project. The contract might allocate specific risks to the buyer. Correct again. All risks cannot be borne by the seller. Some are owned by the buyer. For example, limited liability clause is often used in the contracts to limit the liability of the seller. Let me give you an example. Due to a bug in the code from the supplier, a car maker had to recall 1 million cars. The cost is more than $100 million. The car maker can potentially ask the supplier to bear this cost of $100 million. To avoid such a situation, the seller negotiates the limited liability clause, limiting the maximum liability of the seller to a certain number, let's say $1 million. With such a clause, supplier risk is only $1 million, while the buyer bears the remaining $99 million risks. Risk is shared. The incorrect statement is B. So we can drop A, C, and D. Our choice is B. You are studying various types of contracts that can be used to manage procurement for your current project. Which of the following is not a valid contract type in procurement management? We are looking for not a valid contract type. A. Time and material. This is a valid contract type. Seller is paid for both time and material. Material costs are reimbursed by the buyer. Cost of labor is paid at an agreed upon rate. Hourly rates are quite common. A is not the right choice. B. Firm fixed price. This is also a valid contract type. Buyer pays the seller a fixed, predetermined, and mutually agreed upon price. B is also not the right choice. C. Performance based. We have contracts like CPIF, cost plus incentive fee, that offers incentives based on performance objectives. But there is nothing like performance based contracts. To be sure, let us look at the next option too. D. Cost reimbursable. Yes, this is a valid contract type. For cost reimbursable contracts, the buyer reimburses the cost to the seller. D is incorrect. C is an invalid contract type, so C is our choice. During the procurement process, a project manager organizes a meeting where all potential vendors are invited to ask questions and clarify their doubts about the project requirements. Which of these is the most appropriate title for this meeting? Meeting where all the potential vendors are invited. So, what kind of meeting is this? A. Sync up session. Could be this one. This title is quite generic though. This meeting is definitely a sync up between the buyer and the vendors. But is this the best choice? Let me look at the other options first and then decide. B. Vendor negotiation. The vendors are still figuring out the requirements. It is pre-proposal stage. I don't think they have submitted any proposals yet. It's too soon to start negotiating. Usually, negotiations happen one-on-one between the buyer and the seller. Confidentiality matters a lot. B is not the correct choice. C. Arbitration. Arbitration is something totally different. Sometimes, when there is a dispute between two parties, maybe between a buyer and a seller, a third impartial party reviews the evidence from both sides and decides on the issue. The third party arbitrates between the buyer and the seller. This process is called arbitration. C is definitely not the right choice. D. Bidders Conference. Yes, this has to be the correct choice. All the vendors join the bidder conference to clarify their doubts on the bid documents, SOW, RFP, and other documents. The objective of this conference is to be impartial and ensure that all the vendors have access to the same information. As the QA, questions and answers happen with all the vendors present, they all get to know the same details. Definitely a fair approach. We can drop A. D is our choice. A project manager is working on closing the procurement. She checks and confirms that the seller has made all the deliveries in accordance with the terms and conditions in the procurement contract. There are no outstanding invoices or claims, and her organization has already made the final payment to the seller. Which process is she currently in? So, what is the project manager doing? Closing procurements. Seller has made all the deliveries. No outstanding invoices or claims. All payments are made. Which process is this? Close procurement, control procurement, conduct procurement, or the last option, plan procurement. Plan procurement is where we define the rules of the game. Why do we need to procure? How will we procure? Conduct procurement is the actual execution of the plan defined in the plan procurement process. Bid documents are offered to the vendor. Bidder conferences are organized. Proposals are reviewed. Vendors are selected. Contracts are negotiated and signed. Control procurement is to ensure that the conduct procurement process is following the rules or the guidelines defined in the plan procurement process. In this particular case, the project manager is checking if all relevant steps for closure have been taken. Ensuring successful closure of the procurement is a part of the control procurement process. A, C, and D are incorrect, and B is the correct choice. Remember, close procurement is not a process under procurement management. Don't confuse control procurement with close procurement. You are managing a construction project that requires specialized equipment. You have decided to lease the required equipment from an external supplier. After evaluating several proposals, you signed a cost plus incentive fee CPIF contract with the supplier. During the project execution, the supplier incurs costs that are higher than the initial estimates but achieves all performance targets. What will be the final payment to the supplier? We have a CPIF contract here. Cost is higher than the initial estimates. Performance targets are met. How much do we pay to the supplier? A. The supplier will be paid the costs and the incentive fee adjusted according to the share ratio agreed in the contract. This supplier has met the performance targets, so we have to pay the costs and also the incentives. This is a cost plus incentive contract, and the actual cost is higher than the initial estimate. The cost variance or the extra cost is a shared responsibility. Some of the pain goes to the buyer and some to the seller. The distribution is decided by the share ratio. We definitely need adjustments to the final payment based on the share ratio. Option A looks good to me. Still, let's check the other options. B. The supplier will only be paid the initial agreed amount less the penalty for the increased costs. This statement is somewhat vague. It mentions penalty, but the risk of additional cost is shared between buyer and the supplier based on the share ratio. Option A is explicit about this. A is still a better choice. And we drop B. C. The supplier will be paid a fixed amount, regardless of the actual cost incurred. No, this is not a fixed price contract. This statement is definitely incorrect. D. The supplier will be paid for all the allowable costs only. There will be no incentive fee. No, this is not right. Incentive fee has to be paid as all performance objectives are met. Again, the final payment will be adjusted according to the share ratio to accommodate for the additional costs. D is incorrect. A is our choice. You need to outsource part of the development work to a specialized software development company. You drafted a detailed statement of work, SOW, and issued a request for proposal, RFP. After receiving several proposals, you realize that the proposals vary significantly in terms of cost and approach. What should be your next step in selecting a vendor? We have the proposals, but there is a huge variation in cost and approach. What should be our next step? A. Negotiate with all vendors to lower their cost. Ask vendors to resubmit their proposal. After reassessment of updated proposals, select the proposal with the lowest cost. Cost is the only focus here, with zero effort to understand the reason behind huge variation in the proposals. A is definitely incorrect. B. Evaluate each proposal against the source selection criteria. Use weighted scores approach to rank all the proposals and then select the proposal with the highest score. Weighted score approach is quite common to objectively compare various proposals and then pick the best one. But in the current situation, we should first understand the reason behind the huge variation in the proposals and then go ahead with ranking and picking the top proposal. Again, no effort is put to analyze the potential risks. B is incorrect. C. Seek clarification on the proposals from individual vendors through formal requests. This is what I would do. Call for a meeting with individual vendors and ensure that the RFP SOW documents are properly understood. If gaps are identified, update the documents, reissue to all the vendors, make sure that the changes are clearly identified and explained, and then ask vendors to resubmit the updated proposals. C looks good to me. D. The situation indicates that the information in the SOW RFP is either lacking or misunderstood. So, cancel the procurement process and restart with the updated SOW RFP. SOW or RFP could indeed be lacking, but that needs to be confirmed. We cannot be certain about this without proper analysis. Canceling procurement and restarting without understanding the current situation makes little sense. D is definitely incorrect. C is our choice. During the execution of the project to build a new hospital, you discover that the supplier of critical construction equipment is unable to deliver on time due to supply chain issues. This delay will impact the project schedule significantly. What is the best course of action to manage the current situation? Supplier is unable to deliver on time. The impact is big. What should we do? Let's look at the options. A. Terminate the contract with the current supplier and start searching for a new supplier immediately. This is somehow an extreme reaction. Doesn't look right to me. B. Initiate a change request to extend the project schedule. Again, this is abrupt. We need to analyze the situation first. C. Conduct a risk assessment to understand the current situation, to identify potential solutions, and to mitigate the impact on the project. This is the right approach. Start with risk assessment and then proceed with relevant actions. D. Increase the project budget to expedite shipping from the current supplier. Increasing budget might be a solution, but we cannot decide on the solution before investigating the issue. Risk assessment is needed. A, B, D are incorrect. C is our choice. You are managing a project that requires procurement of custom software. As a part of the planned procurement process, you have prepared a document capturing the precise requirements, functional and performance, key milestones, list of deliverables, and acceptance criteria for this software. What is this document called? So, which document is this? Let's go through all the options one by one. A. Request for proposal, RFP. No, this is not RFP. RFP provides the supplier only an overview of what is expected. Top level schedule, the format in which the proposals are expected. It is not a detailed description of the scope or deliverables and other project requirements. B. SOW. This is the correct choice. SOW, or the Statement of Work, has details about scope, schedule, quality, and other project requirements. Please remember, SOW can sometimes be a part of the RFP. RFP and SOW are often offered as a bundle to the suppliers. C. Invitation for bid. This is incorrect. As the name suggests, the primary purpose of IFB is to solicit proposals. This is somewhat related to RFP. But on the other hand, the primary purpose of SOW is to capture the project details. D. RFQ. Again, primary objective of RFQ is to solicit quotations. Incorrect choice. B is the right choice. You are working as a project manager on a smart city project. It has been decided that the communication modules required for the project will be sourced from external vendors. You aim to ensure a fair and transparent procurement process. Which of the following techniques can be used to eliminate any personal bias in the vendor selection? The goal is to ensure a fair and transparent procurement process. So, how can we eliminate any personal bias? This is important. Let's look at the options. A. Source selection criteria. This seems to be a good choice. The criteria used for source selection are defined by a broad set of stakeholders, not by a single person. The proposals are then scored against each criterion. The supplier that gets the maximum points across all criteria usually wins the deal. Looks good to me. Vendor ranking. Ranking can be the output of the source selection criteria. Vendor ranking in itself will not help in removing the personal bias. The approach to vendor ranking has to be independent of personal bias. B is not our choice. C. Vendor screening. Again, it is the approach to screening that matters, not the vendor screening itself. C is incorrect. D. Independent estimates. Independent estimates are prepared to benchmark the estimates provided by the suppliers. Independent estimates are used for validation of the quotations as tools for risk management. Indeed, independent estimates can also help in reducing the personal bias as these estimates are normally prepared by a third party. But in most cases, the focus of independent estimates is the cost. On the other hand, source selection criteria are broad and comprehensive. I will drop option D and pick A as my choice. You are a project manager in the chemical industry. Your current project is seeking suppliers for some resins. After issuing the RFQ to the shortlisted suppliers, you realize that one of the suppliers, IChemOY, is owned by the son of one of your close friends. What should you do in the current situation? You are in a tough spot. Is this a conflict of interest situation? Yes, it definitely is. Let's look at the options. A. Inform the relevant project stakeholders about the situation and disassociate yourself from the procurement process. This is the best approach. Disclosure of this information is important, and moving away from the procurement process ensures that there is no bias in the process, intentional or unintentional. B. Continue with the procurement process without any changes as the RFQ has already been issued. Definitely not. Supplier selection is still pending. Procurement process is still ongoing. We drop this option. C. Write an email to the contact person at ICAMOY informing them that the company cannot be considered for this project due to a conflict of interest. Again, not a good choice. The supplier cannot be punished for this reason. The current situation is not the supplier's fault. D. Inform the relevant project stakeholders about the situation. Continue with the procurement process while making sure that you are not biased in favor of ICAMOY. This one is tricky. This statement assumes that the PM can ensure no bias even though he has a personal connect with one of the suppliers. This is not easy for any individual. There could be unconscious bias in PM's conduct that he might not even be aware of. Best way is to distance himself from the process. We drop D2. A is our choice. In procurement management, which process manages the relationship between the buyer and the seller and ensures that both sides meet their contractual obligations? We have to identify the process that is used for relationship management. Relationship between the buyer and the seller. We can start by dropping D. Why? Because we have only three processes under procurement management: plan procurement, conduct procurement, and control procurement. Closing of a contract is done under control procurement. Close procurement is not a process. Plan procurement defines the procurement strategy, the rules of the game. Conduct procurement is the actual execution of the plan defined in the plan procurement, while control procurement ensures that the conduct procurement processes follow the rules defined in the plan. This includes managing and ensuring that the conduct of the seller and the buyer is in the accordance to the contract. Contract's terms and conditions are important drivers to maintain healthy buyer-seller relationship. We drop A and B. C is our choice. You are engaged in a project to build a communication module. You and some other members of your project team are currently using NPV and BCA to decide whether a critical component should be produced in-house or purchased from external suppliers. What is the most appropriate name for your current activity? We are currently using NPV and BCA. NPV is net present value. BCA is benefit cost analysis. These are techniques to assess the financial or monetary value of a deal or a project. In this case, we are using these techniques to decide whether we develop the components in-house or buy it from external suppliers. There is a term for this. It is called make or buy analysis. Option C. Do we make something in-house or do we buy it from a supplier? It is make or buy analysis. Let me still look at other options. Always look at all the options in the exam before you make your final decision. A. Financial analysis. We are indeed doing financial analysis, but make or buy decision is our final goal. C is a better choice. We drop A. B. Business case creation. Business case creation is all about establishing the value of a project or a deal in general. In this case, we are trying to establish the value of two choices: make in house or buy. There is some connect, but still C is a better option. We drop B too. D. Alternatives analysis. Yes, we are comparing alternatives. But for the given scenario, make or buy is still the most appropriate name of the current activity. C is our choice. As a project manager, you have signed a fixed price contract with the supplier to develop a test setup. 3 months after the project kickoff, the supplier requests additional payment to cover for unexpected increase in the material cost. What should be your response to this request? We have a fixed price contract, and the supplier is seeking additional payment to cover unexpected increase in costs. How should we respond? It is a fixed price contract. All risk associated with the increase in cost is with the seller. The seller should know that before signing the contract. Our response to this request should be no, because this is a fixed price contract. Let us look at the options now. A. Approve the additional funds to ensure a win-win situation. No, this is not our choice. This will set up a bad precedent and the seller will have no incentive to control the cost. B. Reject the request by the supplier. The supplier should bear the risk of cost increase. This looks like a reasonable choice to me. C. Negotiate an amendment to the current contract with the vendor. This amendment will cover the additional costs. Share the risk with the supplier. This is incorrect. First response should be rejection of the request. Sharing risks with the supplier is not a bad idea, but such sharing is normally a part of the contract. Both parties agreed to a fixed price contract. It is already done. By the way, amendments are not easy, and the project manager should have a solid reason for an amendment. Without any detailed risk analysis, going for an amendment directly is not the correct approach. We drop C. D. Conduct a detailed cost benefit analysis to determine if the additional funds are justified. Cost benefit analysis should be a part of the risk analysis, but this cannot be the immediate response to the request. D is dropped too. B is our choice. Your project team is evaluating proposals for a major component of a construction project. One proposal is significantly lower in cost than the others, but the vendor has a history of project delays. What should you consider when making your decision? This is indeed a tough decision to make. The proposal is much cheaper than others, but there is a risk. The vendor has a history of delays. Let us look at our options. A. Accept the lowest cost proposal to maximize value for your project. The savings can be used for other project activities. Looks like an attractive option, but there are a couple of risks that are ignored in this approach. First, why is that this proposal is significantly lower in costs? Did the vendor understand the requirements correctly? Second, what about the risk of delays? Delays cost money. We will drop option A. B. Delays are bad for any project. Reject the lowest cost proposal due to the vendor's history of delays. Delays are indeed bad. The project team has to assess the cost of the delay. The risk associated with the delay has to be analyzed before any action is taken. Rejecting proposal is quite extreme without understanding the situation. We can safely drop B. C. Perform risk analysis to identify the potential impact of vendor delays and associated mitigation strategies. Yes, this is what we need to do. Understand the current situation, assess the risk. C looks good to me. D. Request additional references from the vendor before making a decision. These references will provide a broader view of the vendor's performance on schedule across projects. This looks reasonable too. Additional references can definitely help. But I think D should be done as a part of risk analysis mentioned in C. We shall drop D. C is our choice. You have hired a contractor to renovate a part of your residence under the FPIF contract. 10% or more reduction in the planned schedule obligates you to pay the incentives to the contractor. The contractor has delivered high quality work and has also managed to reduce the schedule by 5%. How should you handle the performance incentives? We have a FPIF contract here. Here is the criterion for the incentives. 10% or more reduction in planned schedule triggers the incentives. Let us look at the actual results. High quality work, schedule reduction of 5%. Should we pay the incentives to the supplier? Our options are A. Pay the incentives in full because the overall quality is high and the contractor has also managed to reduce the schedule. Quality is not even a criteria for the incentives. It is based on schedule. More than 10% reduction in schedule triggers the incentives. Seller is at 5%, not eligible for incentives. We drop this option. B. Do not pay the incentives as the performance goals are missed. This is likely to be the correct choice. The criterion of 10% reduction in schedule is not met. C. Partially pay the incentives based on the 5% reduction in schedule. No, we have to decide as per the terms in the contract. Partial payments are not agreed in the contract, so C is incorrect. D. Negotiate an amendment to the contract to adjust the performance goals. This will ensure that the incentives are paid to the contractor. This is quite abrupt. It is not a decision that can be taken easily. All relevant stakeholders, from project manager, legal, purchase, and others, should be involved. It is hard, time consuming activity. Not my choice. B is the correct option. Your team is working on developing an electronic control unit (ECU) for an automotive company. You outsource the middleware integration task to an external engineering services company under a time and materials contract. The services company has submitted invoices for approval, but you notice a significant increase in billed hours without corresponding progress in the integration activity. How should you handle the situation? We have a time and material contract here. We have the invoices, but there is an increase in billed hours without corresponding progress in activity. Now, what should we do? A. Approve the invoices and initiate steps to investigate the gaps between the billed hours and the project progress. No, definitely no. Once the invoices are approved, the payment flows to the supplier. Investigating later is not quite logical. We drop A. B. Refuse to pay the invoices. You should only pay if corresponding progress is made on the integration activity. Again, no, this is not the right option. We need to understand the reason behind the gap before we decide on the action. B is dropped. C. Call for a meeting with the services company to review the work completed and build hours. Makes a lot of sense. The situation has to be investigated and understood. C is likely to be correct. D. Terminate the contract and start working to identify an alternative vendor. No, without investigation, extreme actions like terminating the contract is not the right approach. We drop D. C is our choice. You are a project manager for a software development project and have contracted Softla, an external firm, to develop a specific module. The contract specifies that the Softla has to make the final delivery within 8 months after the kickoff. Softla is also required to submit a monthly progress report on the second Friday of each month. But Softla has consistently missed deadlines for these reports. What is your best course of action? Our supplier Softla is failing to submit the progress report in time. Monthly report is a requirement captured in the contract. What should be our action as a project manager? A. The work is progressing well, so ignore the missed deadline. Ignoring a situation is never a good idea. This can lead to something worse in the future. We can reject option A. B. Write an email to Softla with a formal warning regarding the missed deadlines. Formal warning is not a bad idea, but the question points out that the supplier had consistently missed the deadline. We can safely assume that this is not the first communication with the supplier on this issue. There could be a capability or operational reason behind supplier's failure to submit the report in time. It is important that the background of the problem is understood before action is taken. We are not sure about this option. C. Call for a meeting with Softla to understand the reasons for the delay and agree on a solution. This looks good. The effort is to investigate the problem and find a solution. C is the correct approach. D. Timely monthly reports are essential for the project. Terminate the contract with Softla and identify a more reliable contractor. Timely reports are important, definitely, but terminating the contract without understanding the background is not the correct approach. We can drop D. Our choice is C. A project requires the procurement of a large quantity of raw materials. The selected supplier has offered a significant discount for early payment. However, your project budget constraints make it difficult to pay early. What should you consider before making a decision? Discount for early payment. We all love discounts. But we have a problem here. Budget constraints. What should we do? A. Reject the early payment discount due to budget constraints. No, this is a simplistic approach with no effort to capitalize on the opportunity. B. Negotiate with the supplier for a better payment term that aligns with your budget. This could be a way forward. Negotiations will help. The supplier originally might be seeking a payment that is 6 months early, but might be willing to offer some discount even for a payment that is made 3 months earlier. Negotiations will help to find alternatives. Win-win for both sides. This is indeed a good choice. C. Accept the discount and adjust other project expenses to accommodate early payment. Again, this statement fails to consider the risks associated with adjusting the other project expenses. Might not be a good choice. D. Delay the procurement until you have enough funds to pay early. Definitely incorrect. The seller wants early payment, and we are considering delay in procurement. Doesn't make sense. We drop A, C, and D. B is our choice. Which of the following techniques is commonly used to evaluate and compare supplier proposals? We need to find the technique most suited for comparing supplier proposals. A. SWOT analysis. Strengths, weakness, opportunity, and threat analysis. This is a data analysis technique, but SWOT is used mostly for risk analysis. You can definitely perform SWOT on individual suppliers, but is this the best way to compare proposals? I'm not sure about that. B. Monte Carlo simulation. Again, this is a data analysis technique. It is driven by statistics, highly mathematical, used to simulate and understand the variations or the risks associated with the project. It could be risks related to schedule or cost or any other parameter. Monte Carlo, as a standalone approach, doesn't look suitable for comparing proposals. C. Weighted scoring model. This should be our choice. Criteria for evaluation are objectively defined. Each criterion could have a weight attached to it. The proposal that gets a maximum total score across all the criteria is the winner. This technique is often used to compare proposals. Let us look at the last option before we pick our choice. D. Critical path method. Supplier can definitely have an impact on the critical path, and we may need to deploy this technique to reassess the risks. But again, as standalone approach, this is not suitable for proposal comparison. C is our choice. A, B, and D can help in assessing the suppliers and their proposals, but not as standalone techniques. For a CPIF contract, the target cost is $150K and the target fee is $30K. The maximum fee is $50K and the share ratio is 60 to 40. Once the project is complete, the actual cost of the project comes out to be $130K. How much saving did the buyer make? How much fee did the seller receive? We need to find two things. One, buyer's savings, and two, seller's actual fee. We start with the cost variance. Cost variance, or CV, is target cost minus the actual cost. Target cost is 150K and actual cost is 130K. So CV is $20K. Look at the share ratio now. It is 60 to 40. Buyer's share of the CV is 60% and the seller gets 40%. So seller share is 40% of 20,000. We get $8,000. Now we can calculate the actual fee. It will be the sum of target fee 30,000 plus seller's share of CV, which is $8,000. Actual fee is $38,000. If you look at the options, only A has seller's actual fee at 38,000. Seller's actual fee in B, C, and D is incorrect. A should be our choice. Still, for the sake of completion, let us calculate the buyer's savings too. The estimated cost is the cost that was forecasted before the start of the project. It is the sum of the target cost, 150K, and target fee, which is $30,000. We get 180K as the estimated cost. Now, the actual cost to the buyer is the sum of actual project cost, which is 130K, and the actual fee paid to the seller. We calculated that to be 38K. Total is $168K. Buyer savings is estimated cost 180K minus the actual cost 168K, which is $12,000. Again, only option A has $12,000 for buyer savings. A is our choice. In a FPIF contract, the target cost is 100 and the target profit is $15. The share ratio is 70 to 30 and the ceiling price is $130. What is the seller's profit if the actual cost is $160. So we have a FPIF contract. We need to find the seller's profit. We start with the cost variance. Cost variance, or CV, is target cost minus the actual cost. Target cost is $100 and actual cost is $160. So CV is minus $60. The share ratio is 70 to 30. 70% of the cost risk is with the buyer and 30% is with the seller. So seller's share of the risk is 30% of minus $60. Actual price for this FPIF contract is actual cost plus target profit plus the seller's share of the cost risk. This is more than our ceiling of $130. Actual price cannot be more than the ceiling price of $130. So we adjust the actual price to $130. Now the seller's profit will be the actual price. Seller gets $130 from the buyer minus the actual cost, $160. Seller's profit is minus 30. Minus indicates a loss. Seller's loss is $30. B is the correct choice. You work for a small company that undertakes assignments from various clients in the automotive and industrial sectors. As a supplier, your focus is to build an extremely efficient and robust change management system. Which of the following contract types would most emphasize the need for such a system? Okay, so we are a supplier that works for various clients. We want to build an efficient and robust change management system. Which contract type would most emphasize the need for such a system? Change management system helps, irrespective of the contract type. But we need to pick a contract type that needs this system the most. Remember, we are the supplier, not the buyer. A. Firm fixed price contract. So, from seller's perspective, how important is a strong change management system while dealing with FFP? Very important. Remember, in FFP, the price is fixed. The buyer pays a fixed amount to the supplier. 100% risk is on the supplier. Change control is extremely important to avoid scope creep. Increase in scope means more cost. But without agreement on the change, the cost is on the seller. Definitely, A is our choice. Other contract types: B. FPIF, C. CPIF, and D. CPFF offer more flexibility to the seller. There is risk sharing between seller and the buyer. Change management still matters, but the need is somewhat less than that for the FFP contract. A is our choice. One of the output of the controlled procurement process is comprehensive collection of all documents and records related to the procurement. This includes procurement planning documents, SOW, RFP, contracts, communication records, approvals, weekly progress reports, invoices, payment records, and lesson learned. What is this output called? We are looking for an output that is a collection of all the procurement documents and records. A. Procurement file is the right choice. This is an important document and is needed for multiple reasons: transparency, accountability, legal or compliance requirements, knowledge management. I think we have found the right choice. Still, let's review the other options. B. Organizational process assets. This is much broader. and is a collection of all critical resources that the organization has built across time. This is not limited to a specific project. We drop option B. C. Project repository. This is a generic term. Data relevant to a project can be kept in a repository. This could simply be a folder on the computer. This is not specific to procurement. We drop this option. D. Audit files. Audits are part of control procurement process. It is a tool, not an output. We drop this option too. A is our choice. You have selected a supplier for the development of some software modules. You and the supplier have agreed on the contents of the contract. The contract signing process is expected to take another 2 weeks. But the project schedule requires that the supplier starts working on the project immediately. Any delay will seriously impact the project objectives. Given the situation, what is the best course of action? Both parties have agreed on the contents of the contract. The delay is due to the contract signing process. So, what should we do about this? A. Both sides should wait until the contract is signed. The supplier should not start work without the contract. Yes, ideally, the seller should start working only after the contract is signed. It is indeed risky to proceed without a contract. But remember, the current delay is likely to seriously impact the project objectives. Let us review other options and see if we have a better choice. B. Start looking for another vendor that has the necessary technical skills. No, this is definitely incorrect. This will further delay the start. We reject this option. C. Explain the impact of delay and request the supplier to start working on the software modules. Communicating with the supplier is important. But should the supplier accept this request and start working? Maybe not. It is too risky to start with no contract and no official commitment from the buyer. This option can potentially be dropped, but let us hold till we check the last option. D. Issue a letter of intent to the supplier and request the supplier to start working on the software modules. Letter of intent. This seems to be a reasonable approach. Why? A letter of intent, as the name suggests, will document the intention of the buyer to assign development work to the seller. This letter is likely to also state the current status of the contract and the likely date by which the contract will be signed. Letter of intent, in most cases, is not legally binding. It implies a commitment to continue negotiating in good faith with an intention of reaching an agreement. LOI is not a replacement to the contract. Continuing with LOI and no contract is still risky. In this case, both parties have already agreed on the contract terms and conditions. It is just the signing process that is pending. So, proceeding with the LOI while the contract is being signed is a reasonable choice. We drop A, B, and C. D is our choice. This was our last question. Are you ready with your score? How many did you get right? Don't worry, this was not a test. But still, it is good to know where you stand with your preparations. If you got a score of 10 or less, you are a beginner. First step is always important. Stay determined, stay focused. Anything from 11 to 15, you are a rising star. Keep pushing. You're on the right track. With a score of 16 to 20, you are almost there, at the brink of success. Score of 21 and more. You are a champion. Keep practicing and stay on the top. If you enjoyed this lesson, don't forget to like this video. subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment below. Thank you so much.